welcome back to Morbid Movies. I haven't had a comment about how loud my voice is for a while, so I'm just going to keep it at this level, at least for the introduction. Mary, how are you? And why are we doing Boxtrolls today?
Doing pretty well. So we're gonna do Boxtrolls today because I thought it was about time to do something. This one's for the spooky children. I like to throw in a family-friendly film once in a while because a lot of us old goths have kids now in our lives. So, and this
Indeed.
movie, I think people slept on it. It doesn't get as much love as I think it deserves. So
No, no,
we're gonna.
yeah, I'm gonna go through it. I love it. I love it. The animation's incredible, of course. The British, great British pedigree. As long as I've known you, you've loved British people, which is probably why I'm still in your life. So, I could see the appeal of this film for you, and it's got a little bit of appeal for me too because cheese is not a thing for me. I don't like cheese. And I
It's okay to be wrong.
no, but you don't understand. I've got cheese related trauma and cheese, not to spoil anything, but cheese actually blows somebody up at the end of this. So it just goes to show you, even though it's an animated story, don't eat cheese. It's bad for you. It can explode you, especially if you're allergic and a villain, Mary. So yeah, cheese is bad. Don't eat cheese. It sucks. But also lots of lovely themes like, don't judge a book by its cover. Uh, Family doesn't have to be, blood. You can build family and friends without that sort of blood connection, Mary. Those are my takeaways from the Boxtrolls. And yeah, what about you? What do you love about this? And again, there's some really interesting trivia, a lot of British connections, of course. The song written by Eric Idle and Monty Python. So also a great British connection. Is that where the not that I'm trying to sort of assume why you love this so much, but it is a fantastic and predominantly British contribution.
Well, and you've known me for years, and I think this is great because it's a great collaboration between our two countries. Because, the studio that created this is a West Coast of the United States animation company, but as you mentioned, there is just like a fantastic cast of predominantly British actors in this. As you've got Ben Kingsley, you've got Richard Iowati. I hope I got that right. Nick Frost is in it. Isaac Hempstead-Wright, who was in Game of Thrones. You've got Simon Pegg in it. I'm forgetting people, but just like great cast for this film. And you mentioned, is that anything that's set in like a Victorian English kind of setting is like catnip for me anyway. I'm all over it. But and it's just like, then the animation in this is beautiful. It's incredibly ambitious animation. For anyone who is enough to have access to the DVD bonus features, there's some great featurettes about some of the challenges in making this film in terms of the animation, because they did a lot of things that are really hard to do with stop motion. It's about the hardest, most expensive way to make a film. So you can really see the just love of the art come through in this one.
Yeah.
Um, and Leica has made quite a few films that are kind of up our spooky alley anyway, because they did Coraline, they did Paranorman, as well. That they've got some upcoming things that are on our radar, like Piranesi is what they're supposed to be working on now, which is a great book by Susanna Clarke, who is, I believe, a British author, if I'm getting that right, because that's where all of her things are. She did Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, which is a book that I urge everyone to read because it's awesome. But it just this one, I think, is people didn't notice it when it came out, and I think it's one of their better productions overall.
Yeah, I really like it, and shout out to Tracy Morgan as well, who's in this film, a great performer.
He was such a great creepy little guy in this.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And in terms of themes, then, just for people, who are coming to this video and might want to check the film out. Again, I alluded to some there, things that I took from it. Again, want to be very, very clear, don't eat cheese, but also that kind of, that kind of, again, you don't always, family doesn't have to be blood related. Of course, we do get that, good, happy ending in this film, but certainly Eggs, you would call the main character in this, his family is the trolls in this. And of course, he was raised by the trolls. So for me, that's a predominant. And then, of course, don't judge a book by its cover. There are, without trying to get too political, some parallel themes going on today in today's world. Just because you look different, just because you have different beliefs, different ways of doing things, Mary, doesn't mean that you are should be othered or treated differently, as the
Absolutely.
trolls are in the beginning.
Yeah, there's also a lot of buried in there for the adults who are watching it. There's a lot of commentary on things like class issues, as well as there is that whole hierarchy within the town in the film, with the white hats and red hats and things like that. And there's like a few jokes. Like I love that it's a throwaway joke, but the one where they had a choice of building a children's hospital or buying a giant wheel of cheese, and they opted for the cheese. Like, I don't know, that cracks me up every time. But there is, for a family film, quite a bit of underlying commentary there, um that makes it interesting to a more mature audience, which is, speaking as someone who has a kid, so much children's entertainment is painful to watch. It's nice to have something that's actually tolerable.
Yeah, I agree. I really, again, I really enjoyed this. I haven't always enjoyed the films that you've chosen not to be a dick, but this was really fun, and again, it exposed me to. And I'd heard of it, but I'd not seen it like a lot of the films, and this is why I do this podcast and continue to come back, because I do learn things, and I really did enjoy sort of the underlying themes, and of course the incredible animation and the great performances from actors that are really now only just now getting their mainstream success. You're talking about your Simon Peggs, Richard Ayoade, Nick Frost as well. Have been sort of slogging it out for years and doing great things, but are now being seen consistently on mainstream international film roles. And this is a really good, a great example of performers coming together and doing something that they clearly enjoy. And you mentioned there the difficulties of doing animation. One of the things that I would encourage, if people are interested in what we're covering today, is Leica does have a lot of behind the scenes footage on their YouTube channel, of course, for free, so people can check out the challenges, but also some of the enjoyable voice acting. Particularly Simon Pegg's done a video for Leica on that. So I think there's some lovely stuff there, Mary, for people to engage in. And fairly recently they've uploaded this stuff in the last sort of 3-4 years. So clearly they understand, Leica understands the legacy, if you'd like, of the Boxtrolls. There's some lovely facts too that I want to sort of briefly bring in. Because everybody recorded their parts separately. You noted this on your research. Simon Pegg was actually unaware of Nick Frost's participation, which I think is interesting, given that they are so tight, and that is their dynamic, or certainly the way it's
Mm-hmm.
portrayed, is that they're so tight as a unit. And I thought that was really, really interesting. Of course, we allude to that British pedigree, and we allude to references to rat catchers in Victorian England. And as somebody that, of course, mentioned your affinity for Victorian England, I thought that was a really, really great fact that you brought in about rat catchers, Mary, if you'd like to elaborate on that.
Yeah, I went down a bit of a rabbit hole on this, actually, looking into it, because this is something that I had noticed from other fiction I'd engaged. The Terry Pratchett book, Maurice and His Educated Rodents. The bad guys in that film are also rat catchers. There's also an animated adaptation of that, if anyone wants to watch it. That's a pretty fun family film as well. But I noticed there's actually a lot of similarities in some ways between this story and that one, beyond even the rat catchers. I won't get into the weeds on that right now, but just interesting, because rat catching, of course, has always been very important, because they can bring diseases in, and it became especially important in the Victorian era, in England. Interestingly enough, in part because there was not just a rise of Nordic rats, or Norway rats, I think is the species, which multiply very quickly, but also because in the like about starting in the 1860s, they started putting sewers in London to combat cholera. But that gave a safe place for the rats to live and multiply, so it became a huge problem. And because of that, there was a lot of opportunity for upward social mobility in some ways, at least financially, for people who got into rat catching. And that led to also some, creativity, because a lot of rat catchers realized, I can breed rats. I don't actually have to catch them. So there's this sort of interesting, and it goes back further even to the Middle Ages, where rat catchers are considered necessary, but also had some social baggage where they were looked down upon at the same time. And this film translated that into boxtroll catchers. The book it's based on, I haven't read, but from my understanding, does actually also have rats in it, but they did cut that from the film. But I think that that's a sort of interesting intersection of people's social mobility, as well as how changes in technology that improve one area can cause problems in others as well, in the grander history of humanity trying to better ourselves. So I think it makes for a neat place to start from for your villains in the film.
Snatcher, not to again reference your points there, but Snatcher is of course the predominant villain in this piece, and he is just horrific, absolutely terrible as a villain. And there's some really dark moments in this, particularly when he manipulates Eggs's father, and we find out, of course, that he's been keeping Eggs's father the whole time. So I really want to sort of move us forward to favorite scenes, because for me, when Snatcher gets his comeuppance and explodes in a mountain of cheese from the inside out, not to be too over the top and bleak, Mary. I loved the character, even though he was so evil, the Madame Frau moments were brilliant, I thought.
Yeah, he's such an absolutely power and status hungry manipulative character through the whole film, as he is not just manipulating Egg's father, but this entire town and everyone in it. And they have a sense, like, everyone is repulsed by him. No one really wants anything to do with him, but they regard him as a necessity because he's othered the Boxtrolls and convinced them that he's the only thing standing between them and utter ruination.
Yeah, except when he's Madame Frau, because there's some lovely, some interesting, funny moments when everybody realizes that he is actually, Snatcher, and there's a lot of regret in the town. So I know what you're saying is he is, of course, disgusting, and people are disgusted by him, except when he is in his alter ego form, Mary.
Mm-hmm. And I do think that is a very interesting, and definitely, like you had mentioned before, like the song that he performs while in drag was written by Eric Idle, so it does have a very Monty Python kind of edge to it, that portion of the
Yeah.
film, which I enjoy, because I've always been like a huge fan of Monty Python, and Eric Idle in particular. He's actually the one Monty Python member I've met before.
Oh
Um,
wow,
and
awesome.
was absolutely lovely. But so like for me, that part is really fun, and it does play into that alter ego as part of his propaganda campaign to other the Boxtrolls. Is that whole song is a falsified story of what happened to Eggs, the trap shop baby, and his father, to continue to manipulate this town. Just like a really interesting and like well done way to approach that, I think.
I agree. I agree. And one theme that's actually just come up for me when I've been listening to you talk is actually a little bit about sort of gluttony and societies, not to mention particular names in the political sphere, but even in present day and probably through society, our desire for more, our desire for control, our desire for power, and even if it's going to cause us problems. And not to compare political unrest to cheese and a allergy to cheese, Mary, but of course, Snatcher's downfall is, of course, because he wants to. He takes that piece of cheese, even though this is, the people of this town are saying, you the power isn't making you the cheese. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
He wants to consume. He wants to control. He wants to be. He won't listen to anybody saying that he can change
Mm-hmm.
or that he can be a better person. He's just going to eat that cheese, even though it's bad for him, even though because he wants to prove that he can do everything and be in control. And that is ultimately, Mary, his downfall. And I think there's a societal theme there about our constant need to even if things are bad for us, to be in control, to consume. You know,
Absolutely. And I think there's like a real like almost heartbreaking element to that scene, as much as it's also comedic, because he is being told, like, you don't have to do this, you don't have to be this person, things could be okay, but he's so far down his path and has become so obsessed with acquiring more power and more status that for him there is no turning back. And it makes you wonder, it's like, what happened to make him this person, because he's someone who clearly has a huge unfillable hole within himself, that he is just desperately trying to get into that tasting room to be one of the elite the entire time, even though he's clearly not wanted. And truthfully, for me personally, I wouldn't want to be in that room. The people he's trying to emulate aren't really aspirational figures. They just happen to be wealthy and in charge.
are we all not in modern society obsessed with money, fame? What is there? What there's a song in Party Monster. There we go.
That's the way
Uh,
I kept thinking party animal, and I knew that wasn't right.
yeah, but money, fame, glamour. We're all obsessed with this, right? Is this not something that we all subconsciously chase? So I see what you're saying. There probably is a backstory to the Snatcher character, but then are we all not trying to be, at some point in our lives, are we all not trying to be, successful, powerful, rich? Are these not things that people rightly or wrongly aspire to?
I think that is actually like one of the things that keeps this film. I mean, it was made in 2014, so it's a little over a decade old, but I think it's going to continue to be relevant because these are things that are just so baked into our culture and maybe into human nature in so many ways, that just that desire to be bigger, better, richer, more important, more glamorous, that, I think even the, most noble of us on some level harbor. In this film, in a, you know, playful way, does kind of hold a mirror up to that tendency to always desire more than we actually need. And and because he is definitely not the only place of excess in this town and in this story. He's just the ugliest conclusion of that culture.
Yeah. And of course, you mentioned not to hold the mirror up to ourselves, but because we're massive goths, of course, we don't want to be in the room with all the rich people because they're all dressed in white, for one thing, and you and I have, through our history, not just on camera for this podcast, we have a very specific color scheme to our
Mm-hmm.
attire and have always. So yeah, we wouldn't want to be in those rooms because not just because we don't agree with those values, but because it doesn't fit our color scheme, does it really,
Mm-hmm.
Mary?
I
Um,
also, real quick, I do want to also shout out Richard Iowati's character, Mr. Pickles. I think is interesting in the film because he genuinely goes through this interesting arc where he doesn't seem to really fully understand what's happening. He thinks he's a good guy for most of the film, and then you can sort of see this creeping suspicion as things keep escalating, where he's definitely starting to have that "are we the baddies" moment more and more, where he keeps being like, he's like, I think there's one place he's like, I'm 60% sure we're the good guys, and it just kind of keeps going until he has that "I knew people thought we were awful" kind of moment, and I really liked that portrayal, because I think that people do fall into that trap of thinking, I'm following the rules. So obviously I'm the good guy, and there is a huge difference between moral and legal. Those are not the same thing all the time. So,
Yeah.
it's like his character, and Mr. Trout, Nick Frost's character, finally having that moment where they realize that the right thing to do is actually to push back against the status quo and rebel is very powerful as
Mm,
well.
mm. And a tale as old as time in modern in film, but actually, Box Trolls, and this is one of the reasons why I enjoy bringing this up for this podcast, because I think it's told really, really well here and better than in other examples. There are other examples of this being told. And in some of the other films that we've seen, in fact, on this channel, not to name any names, of course, you'll have to go and watch the other episodes. But I think this is one of the better portrayals, certainly that we've covered, of
Mm-hmm.
of good versus evil and the wider dynamics and the nuances of that, Mary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think it is beautifully done, the way that they do it. And I think that in some ways it may be because it's a film that's meant for children, they really just like do away with a lot of the like supposed nuance that adults like to insulate themselves from reality with, and just cut straight to the point of what is good for us and what isn't in the long run. So I definitely think for anybody who hasn't seen it, and even if you don't have kids, it's worth it for any age, just because there is something for everyone in this.
I agree, and again, like you say, for all ages, I think there is something to be entertained by. We'll round up, Mary. I know we could talk, as always, a lot about this film, and I really, really enjoyed it. Is there anything before we sort of do favorite scenes and things like that? Is there anything that you really, really want to mention that we haven't covered yet that you think people should know about in terms of facts, or do you want to move straight into? Because I think we've
Um,
covered my favorite scene, but yours.
Yeah, I think that the only other thing that I really want to highlight is I just want to once again like shout out to the teams of artists that worked on this production, because there were more than 20,000 props made for this film. It was an absolutely massive collaborative effort by quite a few people. And, we spend a lot of time talking about the actors' performances, which are very important, but for a stop motion film like this, the artists who make the props, the animators that manipulate them, are also so incredibly important, and this is beautifully done. And especially like the big mecha drill thing at the end, which is that puppet is 5 feet tall. It's absolutely massive. So to take a puppet that big and be able to manipulate it and make it look, I mean, not alive because it's a machine, but give it that feeling that it's real, and and it's in that world, and it's massive and terrifying. It just like brilliant achievement on the part of the artists and sculptors and riggers who worked on that. So I
Yeah.
just really wanted to, make sure that we give them all the props in the world for that, because it's just such a beautiful film.
It is, and once again, I encourage anybody to go and watch the behind the scenes stuff on YouTube, because it is fantastic, and there's some great stuff there. So yeah, we covered my favorite scene. It's the cheese explosion. I think also anytime Eggs tries to be human as well. I think there's and the sort of transition that he goes through when he realizes that he's human. Also, for me as well, I think that Winnifred, the character, is crazy, a bit too obsessed with trolls in a lot of in a lot of scenes. But yeah, for me personally, it's the cheese explosion. Anything Winifred's in, and I would say Eggs is sort of human transformation are kind of my favorite points, just because they showcase those themes of again, that you don't have to look and be like everybody else to be welcomed into a family unit. And again, of course, don't judge a book by its cover. Would be my, to repeat, my key themes that I took away from this film. Mary, what about you? Favorite scene? Any core themes that you take away or took
Yeah.
away on rewatching?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite scenes is definitely the whole party ball scene, not just because it's like that's quite the animation achievement to create a scene with that many figures dancing in stop motion, but also just it's so funny watching Eggs try to on the fly figure out all of these weird social rules that human beings have, that he was raised by Boxtrolls, he doesn't understand, so he's just not quite getting it right, as even though he's trying, and it's just absolutely hilarious that whole scene. Just the comedic timing is just beautifully done there. And so like that's a big one for me, and just really like the themes about being aware of when you're being manipulated, when a group of people, or in this case Boxtrolls, are being othered for somebody else's ends. I think it's great, this film, because it teaching kids to recognize that early on is so important. That like you said, that don't judge a book by its cover, but also just to recognize that sometimes people will manipulate you into doing just that for their own reasons.
Yeah, you mentioned Snatcher there. There must be a reason for Snatcher to be like this. Portly rind as well. These rich elites. Winnie.
I love her spunk.
Yeah. But clearly, in terms of her fantasies about trolls,
Well, so, I mean, she's definitely a victim of simultaneously having a lot of privilege, but also very little attention from her parents, which
yeah.
I think creates that combination where she's actively seeking conflict.
Absolutely, and fantastic point to bring us around there, Mary. Because again, just being self-aware and being aware, whether you're a child, whether you're an adult, it's very, very important to be aware of what you believe in, what you think. And I think that's what, like you say, there's so many characters, including Winnie in this, and of course the henchmen, that come round and they realize they're self-aware enough to be like, okay, we haven't been great here, maybe it's time we revolt, or we challenge the status quo, which again I think is a parallel theme for modern times. It's okay to have made mistakes, and it's okay to have to be a little obsessed with trolls, but you've got to be aware of it, and and then of course manage that and work with it. And of course I think a lot of characters in this showcase that self-awareness, not to get too psychological as we approach the end, Mary, but I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you've definitely summed that up perfectly. It really is just like such a important core like message of this film, all of that, like recognizing when to push back on the status quo. And I think that's like one of the, other than obviously the aesthetic is very goth in and of itself. I think that's goth, and like quite a few of the other subcultures that are somewhat adjacent to ours have a similar rejection of the status quo in them, that certainly would make this more appealing for us as well. I also, like, completely off topic, but I do want to shout out the Loch Lomond cover of Little Boxes during the end credit too, because it blows my mind. That's an older song, but it fits the themes of the film so bizarrely well. It feels like it was destiny. So I just want to like shout that out too.
Good. Well, excellent. Yeah, and hopefully everybody's enjoyed this episode of Morbid Movies with Dom and Mary, and hopefully you do enjoy the Boxtrolls. Mary, as we wind up, unless there's anything particularly pressing, where can people find us, and what do you want to do next?
So, all right. If you want to reach us, you can do so by emailing us at morbidmoviespod@gmail.com. We are on Instagram at Morbid Movies Podcast, Twitter at Morbid Movies Pod, TikTok at Morbid Movies Pod, and on Blue Sky at Morbid Movies. And the next film we're doing, let me check my list for that as well, because I actually did bother to plan this out a little bit finally. So July, we were going to be doing Fright Night was the plan. So we will be going back to more adult horror themes again, but we will keep on bouncing between that and family films, and just stay tuned.
Okay, cater to that wide audience. Yeah, thank you all so much for watching. What do we say at the end of these?
Keep it spooky.
Keep it spooky, everybody. Take care. Bye.